Hello, adventurers of all shapes and sizes. My name is Chance. Welcome to my guide, and thank you for taking a look at another one of our Ancestries in the core rulebook. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Goblin, which I gotta say has got to be one of my all-time favorite Ancestries in Pathfinder 2e. Basically, the goblins don't really have that much of a tradition or history to them, as so far as to say they don't really document anything. They prefer instead having long-winded tales of great acts that have no doubt been greatly exaggerated. That being said, whether or not it's due to their prone ability to mutate, or whether or not it's due to them being found in different civilizations, there have been some changes in the way goblins run their life, and they've started to deviate from cultural norms of being uneducated, dim-witted, and messy, and instead started learning some lessons from a lot of the other ancestries, which is super cool. Paizo doesn't really elaborate on exactly why this is happening, although it does lead to a lot of very cool world-building aspects to the Goblin Ancestry as a whole. That being said, we're just going to do a quick overview. I feel like theorizing about their civilization and hierarchy is probably best left to another video. That being said, let's dive in. If you're a goblin, you might strive to prove that you have a place among other civilized people, fight tooth and nail to protect yourself and friends from danger, or lighten the heavy emotional burdens others carry with antics and pranks. Now, the goblins are really interesting because despite their appearances, they do have the tendency to form deep emotional connections with the people they care about and value. In that regard, I suppose they are the perfect adventuring companion. Whether or not it's due to their simplistic nature or just the fact that they've always strived to find a place to belong, I do think that this is a great plot hook for any adventurer and certainly a valid reason for them to want to stick around the party. However, if you are a goblin, others probably work to ensure you don't accidentally set too many things on fire. I think it might be worth putting some air quotations over the term accidentally, but whatever. They might also assume you can't or won't read, or wonder how you survive given your ancestry's typical gastronomic choices, reckless behavior, and love of fire. Once again, at this current time in the world of Pathfinder 2e, goblins are slowly starting to make a foothold for themselves in civilization as a whole, but that being said, you're still going to find a lot of people who still assume the worst out of goblin kind, so that's obviously going to be something that you might have to deal with as an adventurer. That being said, let's take a look at their physical description now. Almost everyone has a pretty good idea, but let's dive in regardless. Goblins are stumpy humanoids with large bodies, scraggly limbs, and a massive oversized head with large ears and beady red eyes. Naturally, some of that description changes based on the heritage you're looking at, but for the most part it's true. Their skin ranges from green to gray to blue, and they often bear scars, boils, and rashes. Goblins reach adolescence at the age of 3 and adulthood by 4 or 5 years later. Goblins can live up to 50 years or more, but few live past the age of 20. I think a lot of that has to do with exploitation of their race and just dangerous situations they find themselves in, just through their very curious nature on its own. Now let's take a quick look at their society. Goblins tend to flock to strong leaders, forming small tribes of less than 100, so there's no real true goblin civilizations, at least it doesn't seem that there is in the core world. If you want to make one, go crazy, but as far as I can tell, there isn't really anything to support that there might be one. Goblins also value play and creativity over things like productivity or study, and their encampments erupt with songs and laughter on a fairly regular basis. I think that's due to just the light-hearted nature of being a goblin, not really doing anything other than living in the moment, and I think it's a pretty cool opportunity to roleplay a lot of situations. Goblins tend to assume for their own protection that members of taller ancestries, which often goblins refer to as longshanks, won't treat them kindly. Once again, this is going to be one of those things that affects goblins from basically forever until very recently. So it's going to be likely that they're going to be slow to trust people based on their height. Is it necessarily fair? No, but is there a good reason for it? I gotta hand to the goblins. I do think so. Ultimately, though, that does depend on how your world is set up, so it's a good conversation to have at a session 0. Now let's take a look at their alignment and religion. So, unsurprisingly, organized worship confounds goblins, and most of them would rather pick their own deities, because why not? They typically choose powerful monsters, natural wonders, or anything else they find fascinating. Goblins who spend time around people of other ancestries might adopt some of their beliefs, though many goblin adventurers adopt the worship of Caden Selene, which we've of course gone over in a couple other videos. Basically, he's the god of having a good time and just drinking and partying for the most part, which kind of does fit the goblin mindset a little bit, but I think it's much cooler to have them worship just something that's not an official deity. More roleplay opportunities, and could lead to a very great discussion between a goblin and a theologian in the party. Very cool stuff. Now let's get to their names, and I gotta say, this is probably my favorite part of the Goblin Ancestry. Goblins keep their names simple. If you've seen my other Ancestry videos, you'll know there's nothing I hate more than an overly complicated name that sounds just like any other name in the fantasy world, so goblins do a pretty good job of keeping it super simple. A good name should be easy to pronounce, short enough to shout without getting winded, and taste good to say. The namer often picks a word that rhymes with something they like so that writing songs is easier. Very cool stuff. Some common examples are Ack, Borker, From, Grismuck, Krobby, Lurie, stuff like that. Very simple, very rarely expands more than 2 syllables, but could make a pretty cool story name. So I like it, they're pretty cool. Now that we're done with talking about the goblins themselves, let's actually take a quick dive into their mechanics here. So if you're a goblin, your starting hit points are 6 and you have 25 feet of movement, which makes sense because your size is small. You gain ability boost to dexterity, charisma, and 1 free boost, and your ability flaw is in wisdom. Under languages, you speak Common, Goblin, and an additional language equal to your intelligence modifier, so long as it's positive. You can choose from Draconic, Dwarven, Gnoll, Gnomish, Halfling, Orcish, and any other language which you have access based on your region. And the traits are Goblin and Humanoid. Goblin, by the way, is one of my favorite languages to learn in any RPG that deals with them, just because you typically run into a lot of them early on in the game, and it's a great language to have if you want to form ties early on that carry through the rest of the campaign. The goblins do have a special trait as well. They have dark vision, which is fantastic in Pathfinder 2e. You can see in darkness and dim light just as well as you can see in bright light, though your vision in darkness is a black and white. Well, I've talked about it in other videos. Dark vision is a super strong choice to pick, especially if you are planning on being a little bit stealthier, which the goblins seem to support fully, providing many different ancestral feats that are in line with that. Ultimately, I think they're a fantastic choice for an adventurer. I like their stats, I like their lore, I think there's a lot you can do with them. That being said, let me know what you think of the goblin down beneath in the comment section. Be sure to mention any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, or build ideas you have regarding them, and we will be covering their different heritages right away here, so stay tuned for that. That being said, I hope you all have a great day, and as always, happy adventuring, everyone.